Hey guys, tonight we slip into the soft twilight of Tuscany, where the hills roll like someone gently shaking out a blanket before bedtime, and where you, yes you, are about to wander into the early world of a certain boy named Leonardo. You might imagine this as a gentle stroll, but let's be honest, if you actually had to hike these winding 15th century dirt paths in those charmingly awful shoes they wore, you probably wouldn't survive this. Still, it's peaceful here in the story, which is the best kind of traveling anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, drop a comment with your location and the local time. I love seeing this sleepy little community glow across the map. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself trundling downhill into the village of Vinci, the countryside painted in soft gold, olive trees whispering in the breeze, cypresses standing like quiet sentinels. The air smells of cool stone, tilled soil, and the faint sweetness of grapevines warming in the sun. Somewhere nearby, you hear the quick scritch of charcoal on parchment. That's him. Little Leonardo, kneeling beside a patch of cracked earth, sketching a cluster of lizards that are doing their absolute best to pose dramatically. You lean over his shoulder, and he barely notices you. His eyes are following every twitching tail with almost supernatural concentration, the kind that makes you think this kid probably stares at dust motes like they're giving TED Talks. Mainstream fact time. Leonardo is born in 1452, an illegitimate child of Ser Piero da Vinci, a notary, and a woman named Caterina. This means he grows up with a freedom he might not have had if he'd been expected to inherit a tidy legal career. No pressure to memorize legal codes, just room to wander hillsides and poke frogs with sticks. You watch him scramble up a slope to study a bird's nest wedged precariously between branches, and you get the feeling that if he could, he'd interview the birds about their architectural techniques. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind as you follow him. Leonardo later develops such a fascination with birds that he buys caged ones at markets just to set them free. Some people adopt cats, some people feed stray dogs. Leonardo? He's out here ransoming sparrows with the dedication of a medieval Disney princess. You shadow the boy as he trots back toward the family home. It's a modest stone building, walls warm from the afternoon sun. Inside, he scatters his sketches across a wooden table. His grandparents' cat immediately sits on the best drawing because cats haven't evolved at all since the 15th century, and Leonardo sighs, gently nudging the furry critic aside. You watch his father, Ser Piero, lift one of the surviving sketches. His eyebrows rise. Maybe he doesn't say it, but you can tell he's thinking, okay, the kid might actually be good. Historians still argue whether Ser Piero immediately recognized Leonardo's potential or simply saw a bored child who needed an apprenticeship before he dismantled the entire household to study how doorknobs work. Either way, this moment plants a seed, a father realizing his son's curiosity might be something rare, something worth nurturing. Evenings in Vinci fall softly. The sky deepens from lavender to deep indigo, and town chatter mellows into the drone of insects and the crackle of hearth fires. You sit beside Leonardo under a fig tree, watching him tilt his head to study light and shadow. He asks himself why shadows fall softer at dusk, why the moon looks bigger near the horizon, why water glitters differently on cloudy days. You can almost hear the gears in his head turning. Well, not gears yet. Those he'll obsess over later. A gentle joke slips into your sleepy brain. If Leonardo were alive today, he'd be that friend who pauses a movie every 5 minutes to point out how clouds don't actually behave like that. But somehow you'd forgive him. You wander with him to his grandparents' orchard. Fireflies blink lazily, drifting through the warm air like tiny lanterns. Leonardo cups his hands to trap one, peers at it with enormous curiosity, then releases it again. He's not interested in capturing beauty, only understanding it, and maybe copying it, and maybe improving it. He's that kid. Another mainstream fact settles in. Even as a child, Leonardo is left-handed, a trait that later shaped his mirrored handwriting, a style he claims prevents smudging, though honestly it also had the side effect of making his notebooks look like top-secret wizard scrolls. You continue wandering with him through the fields, the tall grasses brushing your clothes. Somewhere nearby, you hear the distant thrum of a mill wheel beside the stream. Leonardo kneels beside the water, swirling his hand through the current. He watches how it spirals around stones, how it trims arcs of foam around the shallows. One day, this boy will sketch plans for canals, water lifts, and intricate hydraulic systems, but right now, he just enjoys the cool rush sliding across his fingers. Historians still argue whether Leonardo's earliest fascination was with nature, mechanics, or anatomy. Some say he was drawn first to landscapes, others to the structure of muscles and bones. But as you watch him crouch beside a sun-bleached sheep skull he finds on the path, turning it curiously in his hands, you suspect he never separated these interests. To him, the world is one big interconnected puzzle. Animals, rivers, clouds, faces, they all operate with principles waiting to be uncovered. A stray breeze stirs, carrying the scent of wheat and the soft rustle of distant footsteps. You glance over your shoulder to see a cousin waving Leonardo over for dinner. The sky is now awash with stars. The boy scoops up his scattered drawings, tucks them under his arm, and walks home with a gait half thoughtful, half absent-minded, as though he's still solving questions you can't even hear yet. Before the door shuts behind him, he glances back at the hills, the fields, the flickering fireflies. You can almost imagine the questions forming in his mind. How do wings lift a bird? Why does water curve? How does light paint the world? You follow him inside for a final glance at his candlelit workspace. The flame dances over rough sketches of plants, cats, rivers, and one very judgmental-looking goat. You smile because centuries from now, people will whisper the name Leonardo da Vinci with awe, but tonight he is simply a curious child scribbling away in the sleepy Tuscan twilight, unaware that he will one day shape the world's imagination. You barely notice the night fade as your steps carry you forward, straight into the thickening rhythms of Florence, still walking beside Leonardo, though now he's older, taller, and far more aware that the world is basically one giant workshop waiting to be tinkered with. The air here hums with the sound of hammers tapping bronze, chisels biting into marble, and apprentices loudly debating whose turn it is to fetch more charcoal. It's the Renaissance equivalent of a very artistic group chat, just with more sawdust. You weave through narrow streets lined with tall stone buildings that lean in like gossiping neighbors. Laundry flaps overhead, bread ovens perfume everything. A stray cat darts between your ankles, then shoots Leonardo a look like, "You again?" Because yes, he's already sketching it. That boy will sketch anything that holds still for 0.5 seconds. Your steps bring you to the threshold of Andrea del Verrocchio's workshop, a place that's basically the Harvard, MIT, and YouTube DIY channel of 15th century art all rolled into one. Verrocchio isn't just a painter. He's a sculptor, goldsmith, engineer, designer of theatrical props, and, depending on the week, possibly a part-time magician. If something needs crafting, welding, carving, gilding, or inventing, this is the address. Leonardo arrives timidly at first. He's just a teen, carrying a bundle of drawings that flutter with every step. Inside, The workshop glows with firelight and smells like warm metal, wet plaster, and the lemon oil they use to polish wood. You step in behind him, trying not to trip over a stack of half-finished angels. Verrocchio examines the drawing slowly. His brow twitches upward. Then he gives a tiny nod, the Renaissance equivalent of hitting like. That's it. Leonardo is in. You watch as he's handed his first tasks, grinding pigments, sweeping floors, prepping canvases with gesso. It's all extremely glamorous. Still, he does every job with a quiet intensity, the kind where you start to worry he's mentally calculating how many brushstrokes it would take to paint the entire building. Mainstream fact time. Verrocchio's workshop was one of the most influential academies of the Renaissance, and Leonardo trained alongside other future greats like Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, and Perugino. Imagine being in a school group project where literally everyone becomes famous. No pressure. Leonardo quickly becomes the apprentice who asks the questions nobody else thinks of. He studies how paint dries, how light bounces off polished armor, how fabrics fold depending on the angle of your elbow. You notice him staring at the workshop cat, yes, another cat, as it curls on a windowsill, and you just know he's internally modeling the physics of whisker movement. And here comes your first joke of this section. Leonardo is that student who would turn in a simple drapery study but then attach 14 pages of notes on the aerodynamics of tunics. Verrocchio probably both adored and feared him. As days blur by, you watch Leonardo sculpt, sketch, paint, and experiment. He tries blending pigments in ways that make older apprentices shake their heads like we've lost another one to science. But Verrocchio, he's intrigued. One afternoon, he invites Leonardo to help with a large painting, The Baptism of Christ. Here's the quirky tidbit you were waiting for. Leonardo paints one of the angels, and it's so good, so soft and luminous and real, that according to a long-loved tradition, Verrocchio supposedly vowed never to paint again. Did he actually say it? Historians still argue whether this story is true or delightfully exaggerated. Either way, you stand beside the canvas and see the difference instantly. Leonardo's angel looks like it's quietly exhaling, while the rest look like they've been told to say cheese. Leonardo's skills explode in every direction. He sculpts clay heads that look like they could whisper secrets. He designs festival decorations with whirling gears and moving wings. He even creates theatrical props like papier-mâché dragons spitting smoke, basically early special effects. You can imagine him backstage, fiddling with pulleys while muttering, needs more fire. One afternoon, you catch him lingering by the forge. He studies how molten metal pours, how it shifts from orange to gold to dull gray. The heat makes your skin prickle, and a bead of sweat slides down your temple, but Leonardo doesn't blink. He's cataloging every color as though he has an internal Pantone chart. A mainstream fact slips in. Verrocchio's workshop exposed Leonardo to anatomy studies, military engineering, and architectural drafting, disciplines he'd later push to extraordinary extremes. But even here, you sense that restlessness simmering. He's learning everything, yes, but also hacking the Renaissance like an open-world game. Every tool becomes an experiment. Every experiment sparks 5 new ones. You follow him to the courtyard one evening where he studies sunlight filtering through a linen cloth. There's a gentle breeze. Dust glitters in the air. You hear him murmur something about how shadows soften when passing through fabric, and you're hit with déjà vu from those fig tree nights in Vinci. The boy watching fireflies became the apprentice watching photons. It's here you catch the debate this section owes you. Historians still argue whether Leonardo truly innovated during these years or if his genius blossomed later, after leaving Florence. Some claim his early works show raw, untrained brilliance. Others insist his maturity only appears in Milan. But as you watch him press charcoal to paper, capturing the exact way sunlight halos Verrocchio's beard, you think the genius was always there. Florence just gave him better tools. And because we need one more light joke, somewhere in the workshop, Leonardo attempts to mix a new shade of blue, only for an apprentice to shout, "You're using the expensive pigments." Leonardo, without looking up, says, "Yes," and keeps going, the Renaissance version of "sorry, not sorry." You stroll with him through Florence's bustling piazzas after work. Jugglers perform for coins, merchants shout prices, bells toll in distant towers. The Arno River glints like a ribbon of hammered silver. Leonardo stops often, too often, to examine everything: a crumbling wall, a pigeon's feathers, the way shadows ripple under a stone arch. People brush past him, annoyed at the traffic jam he's causing, but he barely notices. He's mapping the world, detail by detail. His sketchbook fills with faces, contraptions, botanical studies, the anatomy of horses, and a few doodles that look suspiciously like early helicopter prototypes, which, let's be honest, is a very Leonardo thing to casually doodle on a Tuesday. Back at Verrocchio's workshop, he stays late, often the last apprentice awake. You sit with him under the dim glow of an oil lamp as he refines a portrait. Brushstrokes soften, edges blur, the figure on the panel seems to breathe. He leans back, squints, and murmurs almost to himself that painting should capture not just appearance, but soul. You think about that for a long moment. The workshop is quiet now, the city settling into its nightly hum. Somewhere outside, a distant lute plays a tender, wavering tune. Leonardo dips his brush again. You watch his steady hand hover over the panel, the same hand that once chased fireflies in Vinci, only now it's shaping beauty that will echo centuries beyond him. The night deepens, the brush moves, and you realize Florence is no longer just a place he learns, it's where he becomes. You drift forward into a new chapter of Leonardo's life without even noticing the seam. One minute you're standing in Florence's lamplit streets, and the next you're gliding into the grand, echoing heart of Milan. The air here feels different, heavier with ambition and a little bit of perfume from someone overusing rose oil 3 streets away. Florence buzzes like a marketplace. Milan hums like a palace. And somewhere in that hum, you find Leonardo, older now, confident, wearing clothes he probably tailored himself because off-the-rack Renaissance fashion just did not meet his standards. You trail behind him through the city gates. Milan unfolds like a scroll of stone and opportunity, wide streets, armored guards, merchants from half of Europe, and banners fluttering overhead. Sforza banners, because this, right here, is the court of Ludovico Sforza, Ludovico il Moro, a ruler who loves pageantry, engineering, fine horses, and the Renaissance equivalent of gloriously unnecessary special effects. Leonardo fits in instantly. He comes to Milan carrying a letter, a sort of Renaissance resume, written in the most Leonardo way possible. Instead of bragging about his paintings, he spends 9/10 of the letter describing machines of war he can design: portable bridges, cannons, armored vehicles, fortress systems. And then, almost as an afterthought, he tosses in, "Oh, also I can paint." You have to admire the confidence. It's like applying to a job by saying, "I build rockets, but sure, I can also do spreadsheets." A mainstream fact steps quietly into place. Leonardo indeed entered the Milanese court around 1482, offering his engineering and artistic services to Ludovico Sforza, who was all too happy to employ a multi-talented genius capable of designing cathedrals, festival machines, and probably better cutlery if anyone asked. You follow Leonardo into the Castello Sforzesco, a fortress palace so large and echo-filled that your footsteps seem to float up toward the vaulted ceilings. Servants hurry past with trays of fruit and documents, and suspiciously tiny lapdogs. Courtiers whisper in corridors. Pages scramble to deliver messages. The air smells of wax, warm linen, and a faint metallic tinge from the armory nearby. It's a whole new world, and Leonardo moves through it with a calm that says, "Yes, I belong here." He's given a workshop, large, drafty, and cluttered with boxes of pigments, gears, coils of rope, and so many sketches pinned to the walls that the place looks like an early conspiracy theory bunker. You watch him unpack his things with a gentle hum of satisfaction. A mechanical lion toy goes on one shelf, anatomical sketches on another. A half-finished lyre sits beside a stack of paint-stained cloths. This is a man who refuses to specialize. And because every section needs a light joke, if Leonardo tried to write a modern resume, it would be 30 pages long and end with, "Also, I'm learning to bake sourdough." At first, Ludovico keeps Leonardo busy with court entertainments, festivals, masks, elaborate theatrical spectacles. If something needs costumes, moving scenery, artificial thunder, or a giant mechanical dragon, Leonardo gets a message. You join him in the courtyard one evening as he tests a stage machine that uses counterweights to simulate flying angels. It creaks, groans, and then flings a papier-mâché cherub straight into a courtyard fountain. Leonardo strokes his beard thoughtfully, nods, and writes, "Angle adjustment needed." You pretend not to laugh. He also designs innovative instruments, including a silver lyre shaped like a horse's skull, because subtlety was not the Renaissance mood. Courtiers gossip about his talent, his strange experiments, and his ability to turn dinner party chatter into full architectural proposals. But court life isn't just fun and festivals. Leonardo is soon assigned a monumental project, a giant bronze equestrian statue honoring Ludovico's father. The horse, intended to stand over 20 feet tall, is so massive that Leonardo spends months studying the anatomy of real horses, wandering stables, measuring hooves, sketching sinews, and probably annoying stable hands by asking if horses prefer facing north or south when they nap. Mainstream fact loading. Leonardo's clay model of the great horse, known simply as Il Cavallo, was celebrated as one of the most magnificent sculptures ever conceived, even though it was never cast in bronze. War got in the way. But for years it towered in the courtyard, a marvel of engineering and artistry. You stand with him as he shapes the clay, pressing his palms into the curves of muscle, refining the arc of the neck. The model looms over you, enormous and quiet, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across its flanks. The sense of possibility is overwhelming. And here comes the quirky tidbit. Leonardo wrote in his notes that he once tried to teach himself Latin using an unconventional method by copying down the Latin words he overheard people shouting on the streets. You imagine Leonardo learning the language almost entirely through phrases like, "Move your cart," and "Stop stealing my turnips." You glance at him as he wipes clay from his sleeves. His brow is furrowed, but he's smiling faintly. Creating something colossal suits him. Still, there's always that restless flicker behind his eyes. You see it late at night in the workshop as he pores over sketches of flying machines, gears, hydraulic systems, and crossbows so large they look like siege weapons from a fantasy novel. He tests pulleys that squeak and platforms that wobble. You swear at one point he nearly invents roller skates. He's like a kid left alone in a hardware store with unlimited time. Historians still argue whether Leonardo truly intended these wild machines to be built or whether they were intellectual exercises. Standing beside him now, watching him sketch the wings of a mechanical bird while muttering about vortices and air pressure, you think it might be both. He needs to imagine, he needs to build, he needs to keep stretching the world until it reveals its secrets. In another gallery, you follow him into the quiet sanctuary where he begins painting The Last Supper, the piece that will echo through centuries. The room is silent except for the soft scratch of charcoal and the distant murmur of monks preparing meals downstairs. Leonardo approaches the wall like he's approaching a living being, studying, pausing, stepping back, leaning close again. He arranges the apostles in emotional waves, capturing shock, confusion, tension. His eyes trace imaginary lines of perspective, converging on Christ's calm center. You can practically hear him thinking about geometry and storytelling merging into one. He experiments endlessly with pigments and techniques. And here's your second joke of the section. Leonardo's alternative painting method works beautifully for about 10 minutes. Then it starts flaking off like Renaissance dandruff. Will future conservators hate him for this? Oh, absolutely. Yet in the moment, the painting glows with life. You step outside later and breathe Milan's cool twilight, the clatter of carriages, the scent of roasted chestnuts drifting from a vendor's cart, and the faint ringing of distant church bells. Leonardo walks beside you, hands clasped behind his back, eyes still analyzing light, composition, motion. This city has stretched him, pulled him into new roles, new experiments, new ambitions. Florence taught him to see. Milan teaches him to build. And as the stars prick the sky above the Sforza court, you sense that something in him is shifting again, some new question forming, some new curiosity blooming, preparing to tug him forward toward yet another horizon. You feel the shift before you see it. The light dims, the walls of the Milanese court seem to stretch, then dissolve, and suddenly you're walking beside Leonardo through a world that refuses to hold him still. Milan becomes memory, fading behind him like a chalk drawing brushed lightly by a sleeve. His pace is steady, but you sense the familiar restlessness pulsing under every step. This man was never meant to stay rooted. He was built for drift and discovery, like a compass needle caught in perpetual motion. War swells across northern Italy, political tides turning everything upside down, and Leonardo, ever perceptive, is one of the first to slip quietly out of Milan with a bundle of instruments, notebooks stuffed with sketches, and maybe 3 shirts if he remembered to pack. You move with him down roads muddied by carts and travelers, through fields glistening with early morning dew, the air full of dust and uncertainty. Yet, despite the upheaval, he looks oddly calm, like someone who's secretly excited about the opportunity to study new rivers. He wanders first to Mantua, then to Venice, then through the patchwork of other courts and towns that dot the region. If Milan was stability, these years are motion, constant, unpredictable, deeply fertile motion. You watch him arrive in Venice, stepping into a city that rises like a dream from the lagoon. The gondoliers shout greetings across the canals, seagulls swoop, and somewhere someone is already overcharging a tourist for seafood. Leonardo stares at the water with the kind of fascination that makes you think he's mentally reverse engineering the tides. The city leaders quickly summon him, not for a painting, but with help with defense strategies. That's right, they hand this gentle, bird-loving artist a military problem and say, "Fix this." Mainstream fact time. The Venetians really did request engineering advice from Leonardo in 1500, wanting help defending against potential naval threats. He proposed reinforcing the lagoon with floating barriers and designing innovative defenses, including a bizarre but clever system using water dynamics to disrupt enemy ships. You watch him walk along the docks, studying hull shapes, tracing eddies with the tip of his boot. He sketches furiously. And here comes your first light joke of the section. Somewhere in his notes, Leonardo scribbles ideas for an armored boat, which basically looks like a very stylish floating turtle. You can almost hear modern engineers sighing across time. After weeks of observing currents, tides, and the graceful chaos of Venetian waterways, Leonardo moves on, drifting like a leaf caught in a slow swirl. You follow him inland, back towards central Italy, where he takes on anatomy with new intensity. This period is where things get detailed. You find yourself in a dimly lit room, candles flickering, the air cold and faintly medicinal. Leonardo stands over a wooden table, sketching the contours of muscles, bones, organs, with a precision that feels almost supernatural.
His chalk moves quickly, mapping the human body layer by layer, as if peeling back the secrets of life itself. You watch him pause, gaze thoughtfully at a tendon in his drawing, and murmur something about mechanical leverage. He sees no boundary between biology and engineering, just systems waiting to be understood. A mainstream fact glides in. Leonardo conducted some of the earliest detailed anatomical studies in history, producing plates that modern medical students still admire for their clarity and accuracy. He dissected humans and animals alike, recording everything with an almost mathematical beauty. But here's the quirky tidbit you're owed. Leonardo became so fascinated by anatomy that he once attempted to understand why old people wrinkle by dissecting the bodies of the elderly and tracing the flow of blood vessels. He concluded, very scientifically, that wrinkles were caused by the drying of the flesh, which honestly is not wrong, but feels hilariously blunt coming from a genius. As you watch him switch from anatomical sketches to hydraulic systems, you realize he doesn't compartmentalize his interests. Water reminds him of veins. Veins remind him of rivers. Rivers remind him of machines. Machines remind him of flight. His mind loops through connections like an ever-expanding constellation. He travels again, you following him down dusty roads bordered by vineyards, across stone bridges echoing with wagon wheels, past hills glowing in the late afternoon sun. Every place he pauses becomes a laboratory. He kneels beside streams to observe vortices, those little spiraling whirlpools water forms as it flows around obstacles. You see him toss a piece of straw into the current just to watch it spin. He crouches like an oversized heron, sketching swirl after swirl. Historians still argue whether Leonardo's fascination with water stemmed from pure scientific curiosity or from his belief that water was the key to understanding all natural motion. But as you watch him poke at puddles in the rain, smiling like he's discovered treasure, you think the answer might be simpler. He just loved how fluid and alive water was. One evening during these restless wanderings, Leonardo finds shelter in a barn tucked between rolling hills. You settle beside him on a pile of hay. Outside, rain patters gently on the roof, ASMR centuries before microphones existed. Leonardo opens his notebook, flipping pages covered with sketches of flying machines. Some look like giant dragonflies, others like stretched bat wings. He murmurs about air pressure, lift, feathers, and the possibility of human flight. Your second light joke arrives gift-wrapped. One of his flying sketches features a contraption that looks suspiciously like two oversized wooden spatulas strapped to a seat. If he'd built it, he might have launched himself straight into a haystack. Still, you admire the commitment. He studies bird wings meticulously, often standing outside in the cold just to watch geese take off. He notes how they angle their feathers, how they glide, how they land with those funny little stomps like they're trying to act casual. You watch him do the same stomp to mimic the movement. Leonardo is a genius, yes, but also a man who occasionally imitates geese in a field. As he deepers into his studies, his notebooks become heavier, crammed with diagrams of gears, sketches of bridges, mathematical musings, and lists of experimental questions. Some pages look like beautiful art. Others look like the doodles of someone desperately trying to invent 5 things at once while forgetting to eat lunch. You join him as he visits small courts, completing occasional commissions, portraits, altarpieces, decorations, but nothing holds him long. One day he's drafting a cathedral, the next he's analyzing the exact curve of a lily petal. His life becomes a mosaic of fascinations, none of them fleeting, all of them relentless. And always he returns to studying motion, water, hair, fabric, wings, human limbs. You once catch him watching a pot of boiling stew, mesmerized by the spiraling bubbles. The cook looks at him like he's lost his mind. You know better, he's studying turbulence. As you walk with him through a quiet valley at sunset, wind stirring your clothes, the horizon painted gold, you sense that Leonardo's wanderings are shaping him as surely as any city or patron ever did. The world is a puzzle, and Leonardo is determined to touch every piece. You feel the roads quieting beneath your feet as you follow Leonardo into the last great chapter of his life.
a chapter shaped not by youthful ambition or restless wandering, but by a slow, reflective warmth settling over him like a soft cloak. The Italian hills fade behind you, and ahead lies France, gentler landscapes, wider rivers, and a king who admires Leonardo not for what he can build or paint, but for who he is. After decades of being tossed between patrons, courts, wars, and unfinished commissions, he's finally heading somewhere that wants nothing from him except his presence. The journey begins in 1516. You walk beside him as he crosses the Alps, his pace slower than in the reckless days of his youth. His hair is white now, long and soft, stirring in the mountain wind like loose strands of cloud. His beard has settled into something grand, a beard that seems to hold its own ancient wisdom, like it's been keeping notes on his behalf. Leonardo pauses often on the trail, not from weakness, but because he cannot resist a mountain stream, a curious rock formation, or a bird of prey circling high above. Even now, nearing the twilight of his life, he observes everything with the same fierce curiosity he had as a child tracing shadows in Vinci. Your first light joke of this section arrives as Leonardo squints at an alpine marmot perched on a boulder, muttering about its posture. You half expect him to approach the creature to check its bone structure. The marmot, sensing danger in the form of excessive scientific attention, disappears into the rocks. When you finally reach the Loire Valley, the landscape feels like a long exhaled breath. Gentle rivers, rolling meadows, clean air, vineyards that glow warm in the evening sun. King Francis I welcomes Leonardo with a respect that surprises even you. This ruler is young, energetic, and absolutely starstruck by the famous Florentine. Your mainstream fact of this section slips in here. Francis I granted Leonardo the title premier painter, engineer, and architect to the king, and housed him in the charming manor of Clos Lucé, connected to the Château d'Amboise by an underground passage. You arrive at Clos Lucé alongside Leonardo. The manor's rose-colored bricks, small windows, and sloping roof give it the look of a home already half dreaming. Inside, there's warmth, a carved wooden bed, a sturdy desk for sketching, a workroom with excellent light. Leonardo moves through it slowly, touching the walls, inspecting the fireplace, peering out at the gardens. For once, he isn't planning improvements. He simply inhales and lets himself be home. You follow him through the gardens where the king encourages him to construct small models of his inventions, bridges, gears, mechanical devices, using the soft French light and calm air to experiment without deadlines. He also meets musicians, scholars, architects, and even children who wander into the gardens to see the old master who builds flying things. Leonardo laughs gently when they ask him if he can make them wings too. There is a softness to him now, a slowing that is not weakness but ease. After decades of pressure from patrons and enemies alike, France gives him the thing he never truly had: time to reflect. Yet his mind is far from idle. You sit beside him in his study as he arranges his aging hands, now slightly stiff, over a manuscript. He flips through pages filled with diagrams of swirling water, mathematical grids, anatomical maps, flying machines, architectural projections. Some pages are smudged from years of travel, others look newly added, written with shaky but determined precision. He murmurs about organizing his ideas, compiling treatises on painting, anatomy, hydraulics. So many dreams still waiting in his notebooks. Historians still argue whether Leonardo ever intended to publish these treatises in complete
polished volumes, or whether he always knew he'd leave behind a labyrinth of notes for future readers to decipher. Watching him shuffle canvas scraps and pages around like a librarian fighting a losing battle, you suspect he wanted both perfection and exploration. And perfection takes time, time he no longer has. But he continues, always continues. In these last years, the king himself visits often. Francis I strolls with Leonardo through the gardens, arms linked, discussing architecture, philosophy, engineering, even fashion. Leonardo has opinions. Your second joke of the section arrives quietly as the king asks for Leonardo's thoughts on a new palace design, and Leonardo responds by suggesting improvements to the plumbing first. Truly iconic behavior. One afternoon, while walking through the manor, you watch Leonardo approach a mirror. He studies the face looking back at him, lined, gentle, thoughtful. There's a weight in his eyes, not sadness, but recognition. A man who has lived in pursuit of understanding now realizes that understanding, full, complete, ultimate, was never possible. And still, he feels no regret. He reflects on Milan, Florence, Rome, friends and rivals, on inventions that never left the page, on paintings that cracked or faded or vanished, on ones that survived. Your quirky tidbit comes softly. Leonardo sometimes joked that he was haunted by his perfectionism, saying he felt cursed to never finish anything because his standards kept rising faster than his abilities. By his later years, this had become a kind of playful lament, something he'd mutter as he readjusted a drawing for the 10th time. You smile at the memory. One evening, you sit with him by the fireplace at Clos Lucé. The fire crackles gently, sending soft amber light across the stone walls. Leonardo holds a notebook open on his lap, but hasn't written anything for a while. He watches the flames instead, the light flickering across his face. You can tell he's thinking, not of what he still must do, but of what he has already done. He begins talking about the patterns of water, the grace of birds, the miracle of the human hand. He muses about how everything in nature reflects everything else, how studying one thing teaches you about another. His voice is softer now, slower, yet filled with the same reverence he once held for fireflies in the Tuscan dusk. Outside, the garden stirs with night breezes. A moonlit path glows pale. The manor sleeps, but Leonardo stays awake a little longer, tracing one more idea with the tip of his finger on the armrest, just a faint motion, a whisper of curiosity. He has become a man whose genius no longer needs to dazzle. It simply exists, quietly woven into the rhythm of his days. As the fire dims, Leonardo closes his notebook gently, as though tucking a child into bed. You sense the closing arc of a long journey. Vinci's hills, Florence's workshops, Milan's courts, restless wanderings, and now France, a peaceful coda. His last years are not loud, not filled with masterpieces or soaring inventions. They are filled with thought, mentorship, reflection, and the steady hum of a life spent in wonder. He is slowing, yes, but he is not dimming. He is settling into the twilight with grace, and you're still walking beside him. You feel the air grow softer as you step with Leonardo into the final stretch of his story, not the end of his life just yet, but the part where everything he ever observed, questioned, invented, or half-finished starts to ripple outward into the world. In these quiet rooms of Clos Lucé, surrounded by papers he never quite manages to organize, you watch him become something new, a man aware that his legacy is no longer in his hands alone, but in the hands of time. The manor is calm tonight. The fire crackles gently. In the corner, a stack of notebooks leans at a precarious angle, the Renaissance equivalent of a hard drive with 98% unsorted files. Leonardo sighs at them, not with frustration, but with affection, like a parent watching energetic children run wild. You can hear him whisper to himself that perhaps tomorrow he'll finally arrange the pages about hydraulics, but you suspect tomorrow will look a lot like today. Another drift through memories, musings, drawings, ideas. Your first mainstream fact of this section arrives as you glance over his shoulder at those notebooks. Leonardo produced thousands of pages filled with diagrams, inventions, anatomical studies, philosophical reflections, and mirror-written notes. Only a fraction survive, scattered across libraries and collections today. And even now, he's adding to them, sketching tiny improvements on old designs or scribbling questions he knows he'll never have time to explore fully. You sit beside him as he turns the pages slowly, tracing lines with the tip of his finger. He pauses at sketches of flying machines, tapping the paper lightly, as if listening for the echo of wings. "One day," he murmurs, "someone will understand how the air carries a bird." You notice he no longer says, "I will understand." There is acceptance in that shift, gentle, peaceful. A wind rattles the shutters. Leonardo smiles faintly, and you sense the weight of years settling around him like a well-worn cloak. Now comes the quirky tidbit this section requires. Among his many jotted ideas, Leonardo once outlined a plan for an alarm clock powered by water, which would slowly fill a basin until it tipped over and made enough noise to wake him up. You imagine this old master being jolted from sleep by a miniature waterfall on his face, and you can't help but laugh softly. He was, even in old age, a man of charmingly chaotic practicality. You walk with him into the small garden behind the manor. The moon is bright tonight, turning leaves silver and stretching your shadows across the grass. Leonardo steps slowly, favoring one leg, the stiffness in his right hand and arm now matched with aches he can't quite hide. But he still inspects the plants with the same focus he gave them as a young apprentice in Florence. He touches a leaf, observes its veins, murmurs about how nature always favors elegant solutions. You imagine the king arriving tomorrow morning, eager to ask another question about architecture or philosophy. Francis I visits often, eager for the warmth and wisdom Leonardo radiates effortlessly. Your first light joke comes here, tucked gently into the quiet. The king once supposedly said that speaking with Leonardo was like opening a rare book, no doubt while Leonardo wished he'd stop rearranging the furniture during visits. As you stroll through the moonlit garden, you begin to feel the edges of debate forming around you. And yes, this section needs the open scholarly dispute. Historians still argue whether Leonardo died peacefully in the arms of King Francis I, as romantic tradition claims, or whether the king wasn't present at all and the story was simply a later embellishment. You glance at Leonardo, who seems utterly unconcerned by the question. History will do with him what it wishes. His task was always the work itself. You follow him back inside as he settles at his desk, arranging a few pages for one last attempt at order. Sketches of river eddies, notes on human proportion, a quick sketch of a strange winged device, and then a small doodle, a cat curled like a comma. He cluckers softly at it, perhaps remembering the workshop cat in Florence, the one that used to sit on his best drawings as if performing quality control. Hours pass quietly. The manor is still, the hallways full of gentle echoes. Leonardo's breathing slows. His eyelids grow heavier. He sets down his pen one last time, not with regret, but with the calm of someone who knows he has spent his life in relentless curiosity. You sit with him in the dim room, feeling the weight of centuries gathering, listening to the slow beating of a world that keeps moving forward as he finally lets go of its mysteries. Morning comes softly. The king mourns. Friends gather. And the world, though it doesn't fully understand it yet, has lost not just a painter or engineer or architect, but a mind that refused to draw boundaries between wonder and understanding. Years fold into decades, then centuries. Leonardo's notebooks scatter across Europe. Some vanish, some reappear, some are misinterpreted, some spark new fields of study. His paintings darken, crack, and get restored again. His inventions inspire airplanes, diving suits, helicopters, bicycles, sometimes directly, sometimes through echoes. His curiosity becomes a cornerstone of human imagination. And you? You're standing in a quiet room somewhere far from Tuscany, Florence, Milan, or France, turning the pages of his story with the same awe he once felt toward falling water or flapping wings. Leonardo becomes more than a man. He becomes the question that never stops unfolding. He becomes legacy, not in marble or bronze or even paint, but in curiosity itself. And as your eyes drift across his final sketches, you feel something warm settle into your chest, a reminder that wonder doesn't age, it simply changes rooms.
The pace begins to soften now, as though the world itself is taking a deeper breath, loosening the tension from its shoulders. You feel the story easing into a quiet twilight, a space where footsteps slow, where thoughts become gentle ripples instead of crashing waves. The manner of Claude Lucé fades, not abruptly, but like a lantern dimming slowly in the evening air, its glow lingering just long enough to keep you company. You let your mind settle into that glow. The pages of Leonardo's notebooks blur into warm textures, the edges soft as worn linen. The lines of sketches no longer demand interpretation. They're simply shapes drifting across your imagination, rising and falling with your breathing. Everything he wondered about, the tilt of a bird's wing, the curve of a river, the quiet scrolling of clouds, begins to fold into a single soft hum around you. The world grows quieter with each passing moment. Even your thoughts seem padded now, wrapped in something gentle. You picture Leonardo standing beside you, not as a master or a genius, but as an old friend, pointing out small wonders, a flicker of candlelight, the way shadows stretch when you lean back, the hush that settles just before sleep. Let that hush gather around you now. Let it smooth the edges of the day. Let it slow the rhythm of everything still buzzing in your mind. The night holds you the way a calm hand steadies a page, carefully, kindly, with an unspoken invitation to rest. There is nothing left you need to follow, nowhere else you need to walk, just the soft echo of curiosity gently quieting itself. So breathe a little deeper, let your eyes drift, let sleep approach like a soft-winged creature gliding closer with every heartbeat. And allow yourself, just for tonight, to rest in the gentle hush of wonder.